Okay, welcome to the first Regis High School 2016 presidential debate. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for coming, everyone in the audience. We will begin, as always, with opening statements. Gentlemen.
Good afternoon. Oh, God. My name is Skeiko Makui, and I'm really happy to be here. Because Randall and I love this school, and we want to do everything we can to continue to make it as great a place as possible. With that in mind, this election will be about three things. First, transparency. Second, day-to-day improvements. And third, social improvements. And we'll be able to talk about each of those in depth either later on in the debate or at our speeches. Randall and I feel like we are uniquely qualified, being chairman of Catalyst committees, on sports teams, in the Hearn, and on an array of different other extracurriculars. We feel like we are able to represent your wants and your needs. We are ready to take office, and we are ready to keep making this school as great as it possibly can be. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out here tonight to support us all. And I'm J.D. Cavelli, and this is my partner, Gene Wachowski, and we're seeking your vote for student government president and vice president. And I think we also are uniquely qualified due to our various experiences. I've served in student government in some capacity every year since 5th grade, and as though that really matters, but I've served in student government since 5th grade, and I've had that experience on council since then. This year I've served on the executive council as the commissioner of publicity, and Gene has served in various roles of leadership that he can go into later. And so Gene and I believe that fundamentally student government exists to serve. And as I have demonstrated my service this year by running the most successful student government dances to date, and by assisting with the first ever student government Catalyst Barbecue, to ramp up money for Kybera, and by coordinating with students in various other Regis groups to moderate the Regis Xavier livestream event. And we fundamentally believe that clubs are the backbone of the Regis experience here. Therefore, we have ideas that increase interclub communication, help bigger and better jointly programmed events, and create a calendar for activities that all clubs and all students will be able to see. And so if you vote for the ticket of JD and Gene, you'll be voting for a ticket of serious change, and you'll be voting for a ticket of interclub relations. So thank you very much.
Okay, so the first question, which we will send over to JD and Gene. Student government, first and foremost, ought to operate as a service organization for both Regis students and the community at large. How will your administration help student government live up to its moniker as a service organization?
All right, well, barring the initial fact that I would like to ask for a definition of sobriquet, but I'm going to hold off on that. So as JD mentioned in our opening statement, we do believe that student government, as I believe is mentioned in the first article of the Constitution, is primarily a club or an organization of service to the student body. As we've demonstrated in our care packages, our grub days for charity, and our blood drive, we've worked in various ways to incorporate the student body into service. But we also believe that there is much more that can be done. We'd like to continue and build upon the successes that we've already created, particularly the live stream event, as JD mentioned, which was well received and provided enormous service opportunities to the community. And at the same time, one of our main talking points is the creation of a liaison committee between all of the major service diversity-oriented clubs, as well as any other interested club, which will provide a forum for each and every club at Regis to discuss how each of us can work together to serve the community better. And we'd also like to pioneer the first annual Primal Scream Fest before finals, where students can join together in the quad and vent their discontent with their teachers' assessments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Skeiko and Randy.
Yeah, sure. So we see student government as dividing into two different service categories, right? The first one being community service outside of the Regis community. Now, as the two candidates here with the most Catalyst experience, and more importantly, who have both founded and run committees for years, we have working relationships with New York City charities that we believe we can leverage to impact the community beyond what we're doing right now. Additionally, we'd like to work with Catalyst to make sure that they have all the funding that they need to carry out various service opportunities. The second vein of service that we're going to be focusing on is service to the school community, right? We're going to do that in a couple ways. One is going to be the day-to-day life of the Region. The second is going to be expanding the social horizons of the Region. And additionally, we're going to be looking towards improving your Regis experience in your extracurriculars, right? We're going to do that in a really simple framework, which is that we're going to create an inclusive and responsive government, which we're going to be going over later. But what that really means is that we're going to, one, be listening to you, and two, be actively doing something with the feedback that we're getting. Thank you.
So this is a question directed to Mr. Zuccamaglio. In your platform, you mention how Spirit Week and dances are in desperate need of new ideas. So what new ideas would your ticket bring to the table as regards those two specific areas?
Sure, so first dealing with Spirit Week, we're going to be doing a couple things to that. The first is that we're going to be creating more events that take place during the school day, which don't require you stopping class, right? So like costume competitions, themes throughout the day, something that you can get into without taking away from class time, because we have to think about real things that we can do. In the terms of dances, we have a couple of ideas. One is that we're going to start using the revenue brought in by dances in order to make sure that we have refreshments and food there. Additionally, we're looking to partnering with Coffee House and multiple other music organizations to have music in the quad. Even if it's not through that vein, we hope to have music in the quad irregardless, right? So we're basically taking what we have already, building upon that, using the Regis network to do so, and that's how we're going to be revamping those things. Thank you.
All right, so I'll give this to your ticket first to answer. A major theme discussed by both of your tickets is that you'd like to maintain transparency and accountability. What would you do, most importantly, that is not already being done to open channels of communication with the student body?
Yeah, I think I agree with JD that student government should be an organization of service. And given that, I think that it is important that all of us are involved in this, right? And the easiest way to do that is with transparency. And to get us all involved, there are a few ways to do that. First, we want to have monthly meetings and presentations explicitly saying what we're doing, right? So not just open meetings. We want meetings where we present to you, the student body, whoever's interested. We want to give you a chance to see what we're doing. Second, we want to email the student population more. We want to have a more constant stream of communication. And third, we'd like to release the financial reports, which have yet to be released for this year. In short, we want you to be involved, right? So come to the meetings, come to read reports, because the more people who are interested, and the more people who are devoted to making student government as good an organization as possible, who are not even necessarily in student government, the better organization it will be. Thank you.
Gene and JD?
Yeah, so JD and I believe that numerous strides have been made in terms of transparency, but there's definitely work to be done. So transparency in our minds is a two-way street. On one hand, we need to be able to hear what the people want, and on the other hand, the people have to be able to hear what it is that we are doing to make sure that we are respecting their wishes. So in that regards, the two things that we think are most important in that aspect are a drop box and a drop in. So the drop box, the main thing that we'd like to do is to offer students the forum to either anonymously or attribute their name to any suggestions, concerns that they'd like to have for review of the executive board, which will give the opportunity to have those concerns that sometimes go voiceless voiced. And at the same time, we'd like to encourage students to actually attend the drop-ins, which I believe is an instituted practice where students can come in and supervise the meetings. So 5 to 10 minutes of open forum for people to bring forward their own ideas and make sure that those ideas are actually being discussed. And in that line, we'd also like to work on a student government column in the OWL, whether it's the secretary or the commissioner of communications. We believe that by having this means of communication through one of Regis's major publications, we can open the forum more to those who are interested. Thank you.
This is a question for Mr. Calvelli. As part of your appeal to students, you talk about establishing a liaison committee. Actually, this was also mentioned in the response to the first question. What will the committee entail, and what would be its goal as you see it?
Sure. So first on what the committee would entail. Essentially, we want to create a subset of the student government that would include basically liaisons, for lack of a better word, or envoys from different clubs from the school community. And so we would create a forum for those people to discuss ideas and to discuss ideas in a practical and influential and just successful way. Because as it stands, there's no real place in this school at this time for all clubs to meet together and have just open discourse with each other. And we think that out of that will come a lot of really great events, a lot of really great ideas that wouldn't be able to come out of just one man thinking or two men thinking or even, but just having this discourse among all the clubs would really create that environment. And so the goals and what we think would be really beneficial because of that club would be those ideas that wouldn't be able to come out of anywhere else, right? Would be those events that wouldn't be able to be planned if it weren't for that communication.
So part and parcel to the success of many Regis social functions, whether they're mixers or dancers or the like, this requires good working relationships with our sister schools. How will you make good on promises to improve dances and bring in an increase in attendance from outside of Regis? On that note, what new events do you have in mind beyond dances and mixers? Yeah.
So Randall touched on this briefly in the previous question, but our primary goal, as soon as we're in office, is to spruce up these dances, because I think that's a really important thing that student government does. And just to repeat, because it is so important for us, the three things that Randall said. One, we want to put refreshments and food at the dances, because honestly, you shouldn't be gouged by vending machines while you're there. Second, we want to have live music in the quad. Randall touched on this. I think it's a kind of a interesting alternative to the kind of dance music out here. If we had some sort of acoustic option in the quad. And finally, we'd like to have a photo booth or some sort of Instaprint photos for people, kind of like that happens in the semi-formal, for people to commemorate their experience here. And also, touching on that, we want to kind of move beyond the girls at SVF and DA, although they are our good friends. In fact, I just got a text today from the current president of Sacred Heart, Rose Farah, who said she would love to be have a better connection with us in terms of dances and mixers. Thank you.
Thank you. JD and Jean?
So I can speak personally to this as the former commissioner of publicity, and so I think that along this vein, right, one of the things that was most successful at bringing attendance to dances was direct outreach to girls' school in the area. And so with the help of Vince as president, with the help of Commissioner of Communications, Dave Kilduff, we actually increased the outreach this year to greater numbers than it ever had been before. There's this huge email chain of just a bunch of emails back and forth and no, I'm not Hillary Clinton, a bunch of emails back and forth between our schools and the fellow girls' schools in the area, Marymount, Chapin, Brearley, Spence, and Sacred Heart. And we believe that even if we aren't to be elected, this information should be something that should be passed down, and we will work hand in hand with whoever is so that that information continues on. And so that increased outreach to girls' school also was outside of this particular, student government area, so to speak, like the Upper East Side, and we increased outreach to girls' schools outside the area, Westchester and Ursuline. There actually came in a bus for one of the dances, and in New Jersey at Vin's request. And so as such, we've actually had the most successful dances in student government history under this past administration. But as it comes to new ideas, we think that one of the best ways to have those new ideas would be joint events with other schools. And so events in conjunction with clubs at this school, with similar clubs at other schools, at girls' schools, and the liaison committee could have a hand in that as well, and that student government would be able to facilitate those relations. And so that's really where we stand on that issue.
Thank you.
Question for Mr. McCooey. You mentioned in your platform how student government should be, quote, integrated in day-to-day life at Regis, end quote. What does this mean practically? How will student government integrate into the daily lives of Regians?
Well, I think beyond dances, another primary function of the student government is to help Regis kids function better in school. And so in terms of day-to-day involvement, we think a big issue that is easily fixable is the restrooms at Regis. One, I think if we put air fresheners in them, that might improve the quality of the bathrooms. And second, dividers in the urinals. I've heard several complaints that in the cafeteria, the lack of dividers is uncomfortable to some. Thank you. And I think really there are more improvements to be done. Working with our transparency, we'd like to have a greater communication. So for example, the people who told me they wanted dividers in the restrooms, we'd like more ideas like that, more ideas that can be accomplished by student government. Thank you.
I'm going to push you on this, actually, and just ask you to flesh that out a little bit more. Beyond restroom enhancements, how practically do you see student government actually being integrated into the day-to-day at Regis? What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I mean that student government can help make a Regis Day better. So, for example, one of just this today, I was in, I think Miss Papp's class, who's in the back. Hi, Miss Papp. And I had no idea what time it was. I don't have a laptop. I don't wear a watch. My phone was off. So, working clocks in all the classrooms would be another great day-to-day, improvement we can make.
Thank you. All right. The next question for both of you. Another major theme both tickets have discussed is the amorphous nature of student government with regard to its actual role in student affairs. So this sort of dovetails with the last question. What specifically do you propose as a solution to this alleged problem? I'll throw this over to JD and Jean first.
Sure, thank you. So, just to be completely frank, I'm a bit confused by the question, only because of the use of the, thank you, Mr. Garner. Only because of the use of the word amorphous to me, and maybe this is just my Latin speaking, but amorphous to me means, without form. And so I don't particularly find student government to be without a form. Having been in the council, there's definitely a structure to how things are done. In the council, there's definitely a structure to how events are run, roles to be filled, and when those roles are filled and carried out, they're carried out to great effect, as we've seen in the many number of successful events we've had this year. Can there be more structure? Absolutely. And, in case you didn't know where I was going to go with this, our liaison committee, right, would be an excuse to have that invoice, that influx of voices, and to get people working on more events more efficiently to kind of remedy this amorphous nature that apparently some people believe to be true. And on top of that, we'd also like to once again stress on the ideas of transparency, that we'd like to have a Dropbox so that people can better discuss with us if they do feel that student government is amorphous or have any ideas to change that, or, the drop-in period that we'd like to better idealize. That's not the right word. But last but not least, that's good. I'll end there. Thank you.
Randy and Skakel?
Sure. So seeing as it's ripped from my platform, I think I would have a better idea of what...
Gently taken.
Gently taken.
Yeah, not
All right,
ripped.
Cool. So one of the things that we were talking about when we talk about the amorphous nature of student government is really its appearance to the student body, right? How it's perceived by the student body and what the student body thinks that it does, right? Outside of the emails that we get from student government, most students have little to no clue what we do behind the scenes, right? So we aim to fix that in a couple different ways. One is that the secretary's notes that are currently being taken are hidden on a WordPress blog in the student government. We want to send those to the inboxes, right? On top of that, we want to make sure that they're more than just abstract bullet points, so that you have a real understanding of what's going on at the meetings. We want to be able to log proposals to the student government. So if someone comes to us with an idea, you can track that idea and our discussion of that idea, right? We're really going, on top of that, we're going to be enforcing articles in the Constitution, right? Because if we're reading the Constitution, as Gene quoted in his answer to the first question, there are responsibilities of the Secretary and the Treasurer that aren't being met, that are aimed to increase transparency.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break, actually, so go ahead and, walk it off, and we'll be right back.
We'll go to a commercial. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and we are back with the 2016 presidential debate. Thank you for your patience. We're actually going to depart from our scheduled program. There was a point of clarification from Mr. Don Allison in regards to the comments you gentlemen made about restroom dividers. Now, historically speaking, these restroom dividers that you have claimed do not exist actually did exist, and that's evidenced by the holes on the wall. So it seems as though they were torn down by students at a previous time. Who knows why? That said, this interest in replacing restroom dividers matched with your interest in replacing the clocks in the school raises an interesting question. You're now making a foray into a sort of service to the school that could really fall under maintenance. And as you make these contributions to the school, my question is, what degree of responsibility do you think student government then bears in terms of upkeep? What if those dividers are torn down again? Are you really willing to task a particular officer in student government with the duty of replacing batteries in all of the clocks that you have now put through the school? Is it up to student government to make sure that the clocks are keeping proper time? In the long run, how do you envision this proposal? I throw this to you guys, and then I'll give you a chance to answer as well. Thanks.
Sure. So a couple things to note. One is that student government seems to have thought about going into this area of maintenance, as you would call it. There are notes about putting clocks in the building since early October, actually. What we want to do is we want to do maintenance to the point where it impacts the day-to-day lives of Regians, right? Obviously, the school isn't going to start throwing like day-to-day like sweeping of the floors or replacing janitors at us, right? But like in terms of like tearing down the dividers between the bathrooms, you seem to have a little bit of personal knowledge of how that happened. I think living without the dividers would have proved a good idea why you shouldn't tear the dividers down for a couple of reasons. And on top of that, I think that it's more about where can we help out the school rather than take over the school, right? We're not looking to take over maintenance. We're looking to say, hey, we can help you out with this. We know that you have a lot to do. Thank you.
Gene and JD?
Okay, so on the question of maintenance, actually I believe that our deliberations on the matter came down to a question of, okay, well, we're going to set aside the money so that we can give the gift to the maintenance staff so that they can use student government funds in order to fund clocks. And so at the end of the day, the deliberations that were done in our particular sphere, in our particular environment, was that we are going to make contributions to maintenance so that they can have the job to be able to undergo those particular situations. And yet still, I don't believe the main reason that student government should exist to be a maintenance staff. I don't think that that is how the way that we should serve student government or the idea of student government in student day-to-day life. I think that the way student government should be perceived in student day-to-day life is through this idea of better interclub relations, right? So I think that if it comes down to the question of how do we want student government to be viewed by the student by the student body, forgive me, is that we would rather student government be viewed as an idea, as a government that works in conjunction with the people in order to put on events, in order to do things of that nature, as opposed to focusing so much on the, the nitty-gritty as to the maintenance of the school.
Thank you.
Question for Mr. Witkowski. In your platform, you discuss your, and I quote, extraordinary opportunity to bring new ideas to the table, unquote. What ideas do you have in mind, and how will you realize your role, as you put it, as a voice of the students?
Well, I'd actually like to take this opportunity, if it's all right with JD, to say that I was actually the one who came up with the ideas for both the liaison committee and the Dropbox. So JD actually came to me initially with the idea of creating initially a liaison between Catalyst and student government, as Catalyst is the most outward service organization while student government is the most inward, and we thought that putting the two together would best serve. So in terms of that, I think those ideas, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting lost. I'm sorry. Would you repeat the question?
Sure, and the officers excuse themselves for their whisperings. Simply, how will you be a voice for the students? I mean, this is a big part of your platform. What does that mean to you to be a voice for the students?
Well, yeah, I think what makes me a voice for the students is the fact, or the simple fact that I have participated in so many extracurriculars. I think my count is up to 15 at this point. Whether that's too much or too little is up to your discretion. But I think that having been involved in so many extracurriculars, that gives me the unique perspective of having seen so many facets of the Regis community and bringing the ideas and the aspirations, the desires of the people in those clubs to the forum of student government will provide an enormous opportunity for real change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this year, and I'll send this over to Skakel and Randy first. This year, the student government passed 2 amendments to the Constitution. Are you content with the existing protocol established under the Constitution? Do you have any issues with the 2 amendments that were passed? And if not, what would you change and why?
So yeah, first of all, we think that senior suffrage and the decision to include people who hadn't previously been in government are two, this is like Randall, are two undisputably good things. The Constitution in general, really, is a good thing, and it's a gift that many other schools don't really have. However, Randall and I notice that there has been a systematic avoidance of constitutional responsibility as of late. Most notably, and these shirkings of responsibility could, in our mind at least, help improve student life, right? So there is this idea of transparency, right, that hasn't really been implemented, at least in the financial sector, or the financial section of student government. And then also in the Constitution, there's an article that says that each grade, the officers from each grade must host an event or must run an event that I think would actually be kind of fun for each grade to have their own event. But yeah, in conclusion, we really love the Constitution. However, it only works as a thing if we're willing to follow it. Thank you.
Sure. So regarding the amendments in the Constitution, we believe that the current administration was able to put through some very successful amendments in expanding the democratic process. And we believe that everything, we should strive towards making the democratic process more inclusive. And as such, our ticket is relatively content with the protocol in place when it comes to expansion of democratic process. But we believe that if the student government were to approach our administration regarding this protocol or regarding these amendments or having any ideas or issues of that nature, then deliberation will ensue within the council, as we believe that it is the government's duty to try and effect the changes that the student government would like to have. And we think also, kind of piggybacking off of Gene's question before, that the inclusiveness of our ticket and the ideas that we bring forward to the table are best suited to be able to have that effect happen, have that voice of the people, have that voice of student government able to be in deliberation. So, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a question for both tickets. As was recently elaborated in a recent editorial in The Owl, Regis High School's student newspaper of record,
Now in print.
a concern was voiced about the role of student representation in the new class officer system. The question is, what position do each of your tickets take on the role of student representation, and how will you ensure that all advisements are represented across all class years?
Okay, so we'll take it first. There are a couple things there. One, that we think the class officer system, as Skakel mentioned before, isn't being used to its full effect, right? We believe that if you're required to do an event for your year, then you should be doing that event, right? You should be actively fighting for the interests of the students, right? In terms of making sure that you're spread out across all advisements, we can't ensure who's elected, right? We're not going to campaign for individual people to ensure that it's spread across the advisements, but I think that people usually vote with their advisement, so it tends to work out pretty evenly anyway. More importantly, we intend to provide funding and support for class officers to accomplish these events, right? So instead of just pushing them out into the wild on their own and saying, listen, you need to do an event, we're going to say, okay, we're going to give you a budget to do this event, we're going to give you this network of support necessary to do that event, and that's how we're going to empower class officers and represent the student body more efficiently. Thank you.
Thanks.
You guys can respond.
Oh, sure. So I think regarding the role of the class officer, right, we believe that it is important for us to better bureaucratize the government. And let me explain what I mean by that. We mean that we should allocate more power to those students and give them avenues in which they can get involved. And I believe our tickets agree on that front. And I think it's fair to say that we should laud the efforts that were made this year in that particular regard. There were portions in working in the barbecue, positions made in working in the barbecue, positions made in working in the blood drive, positions made in working in care packages, all of these different, the dances, the student dances, which has been, a longstanding tradition for student government to work hand in hand with. So there are already these avenues that exist. And I think in order to create these avenues even further, we should once again apply this liaison committee idea, which would give officers these avenues to help with the events of other clubs and would give them that network that Randall and Skakel so talk about in order to actually have those events take place in the ways in which they want them to take place. And so we believe that our ticket creates an inclusive atmosphere of open discussion, discourse, which lets new ideas flow organically, and that would be kind of at the purview of the Vice President, as Gene already discussed in his question. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so this is the final question, and we'll start with Gene and JD. Simply put, what distinguishes you guys most clearly from your opponents? Inauguration is what, May 11th, once the senior class has ended its class time here. Give me a roadmap of your first 100 days in office.
So when it comes to our first 100 days in office and what we think we bring uniquely to the table is that we bring to you a campaign of ideas. Right? We bring to you a campaign of ideas both today and ideas tomorrow, a progressive campaign of actual change. And so we believe that our campaign will be one that will be coordinating, amplifying, and serving with integrity. And so on the concept of coordinating, we believe that our campaign will be coordinating ideas and events to create a more cohesive council and a more cohesive school body. We believe that we'll be able to amplify opportunities for involvement within the council and within the greater school environment. And we also believe that we will serve with integrity because we don't want to be the student government, we want to be your student government. And so we'd like to build on the new and incorporate, or we build on the old and incorporate the new so that we can create that government that we all so want to do. And so when it comes to specifically what we'd like to do in our first 100 days, we would like to work on those normal everyday things that Skakel and Randall brought forward, but not in the maintenance front, but rather in the inclusiveness of student government and the cohesion between student government and the student body. And so specifically, we'd like to work on the creation of that liaison committee as quickly as possible with as many members as possible, and we'd like to get out of that a club fair to take place at the beginning of the school year so that even more involvement and more voice can be seen from all of the clubs at the school, and we have a lot of them. And we'd also like to create that Dropbox drop-in policy, and basically we'd like to create the real change that, start early on the real change you'll be able to see both today and tomorrow.
Thank you.
Sure. So there are a couple things that we would do almost immediately, right? One is that we're going to start allocating the surplus budget, right? Good financial planning is going to be the prerequisite of any successful executive board of student government, right? As it stands, there's a huge amount of money that isn't currently allocated, or there have been no published plans for allocation. We intend to fix that, right? Going into the year with a good amount of funding, an idea of where we're going to spend that money is important. Additionally, we're going to start planning with major clubs, such as Catalyst, the Hearn, to make sure that we're coordinating planning, right? One of the things that we want to do is we want to, A, maximize attendance, and B, maximize participation, right? In order to do that, we have to start planning before September hits. We want to get the ball rolling, make sure that we have measures in place to make sure that we're not surprised when it turns to September 17th or whenever we're starting school, mid-September this year. The other thing is that we're going to start implementing accountability measures almost immediately, right? We're going to make sure that the treasurer and the secretary are fulfilling their constitutional obligations, right? We're going to set a standard which is going to be in place for the next year, and we think that's really important. In terms of coordinating with other clubs, we don't have this idea of creating a new liaison committee or creating a new body. We have a very simple policy, right? Any leader of any club can simply walk into a student government meeting and have their voice heard, right? Very simple. We're not going to create a new Congress, right, to solve problems. We're going to interact with the students. We're going to have an inclusive and responsive government. Thank you.
With all due respect to Moderator Grunner, there's one final question. So, did they get a chance to?
Well, I suppose so, yeah.
By all means.
With all due respect to me,
All due
I'm
respect
sorry.
to the Silver Fox, we would like to respond to their statement if at all possible. So, considering that one of the main tenets of their campaigns, as they wrote in their platform, is the amorphous nature of student government, right, on this concept of not having a form to it, that allocation of that funds would be able to be done through a better formation of the student council itself, through this liaison committee that we bring forth. So the way in which they'd like to bring forward these grand ideas really can't happen unless there is that structure that they believe we need in order to create that, that situation to occur. So we once again would like to say thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add something to that as well. Building off of what we've said in the beginning, that student government is primarily a service organization, we believe that the best way that student government can actually serve is by aligning ourselves primarily with the service-oriented clubs as well as integrating diversity. And the best way that we believe that we can do that is through the liaison committee, particularly in the membership of clubs such as Catalyst, Spectrum, Diversity, and Heritage, of which I have actually taken the liberty of speaking to members of each club, all of whom have expressed interest in joining. So the main goal of that is to take these smaller clubs under our wing, build them up, provide them hopefully with the funds that they need to get what they want done, and create new opportunities, such as pioneering perhaps a day of silence in partnership with Spectrum, or a Gameathon fundraiser in partnership with Games Club. Thank you.
We'd like to claim a short right of response there. I believe we've already clarified this, but we'll do it.
Granted.
Thank you. I believe we've already clarified this in a previous question, but we'll talk about it again, the amorphous nature, which they like to quote. Again, what we mean when we say that is the fact that the student body doesn't perceive student government to be doing all the background work that we're doing, right? We said absolutely nothing about structure. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Sure.
Okay. And then regarding, how we want student government to be perceived, once again, we'd like to stress on our answer to the question before, which is that we would like student government to be perceived as an organization dedicated to the clubs of the school and dedicated to the people and not dedicated to maintenance. Thank you very much.
We feel no need to respond to that.
Hey, Mr. Quinn.
Yes?
Do you have a final question in
Oh,
mind?
yeah, sorry. Yeah, I do. Okay. The final question.
The ink is still wet.
Okay. Imagine, by virtue of an executive order, you are allowed to install in your administration one faculty member. Which faculty member would you install, and in what office would you install them? You can take a moment to respond. Ask for responses from each ticket.
Gentlemen.
Yes. So we would choose, of course, the obvious answer, which is Dr. Fernando Gomez Herrero. As a sort of interscholastic correspondent and really a liaison for the school, I think he really would work well in that position. Thank you.
Okay. So I think, given our idea of inclusiveness, right, and our grand plans for greater involvement in student government, we believe that if we were to create one position for one faculty member to be a part of, we would have Miss Papp be the honorary meme master. Thank you very much.
I like that. All right. You each have 30 seconds for closing statements. We'll start with Jean and JD.
Okay. So on closing statements, we did get a little bit neck and neck there, so I apologize for that, guys. But I would like to say that when you vote for our campaign, you'll be voting for a campaign, like we said before, of ideas. A campaign of ideas today and a campaign of ideas tomorrow, because we will create that structure with which we will be able to have ideas implemented today, and that structure with which we will be able to have ideas implemented and discussed and deliberated on tomorrow. And so if you guys believe in a campaign of change and of progression and of moving forward, then ours is the campaign to vote for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Skakel and Randy?
All right, so we have a very clear message. It's very simply transparency and an inclusive government, right? We're going to do that through the simplest means possible. Primarily, we're going to be introducing accountability measures, making sure that people are doing their jobs. You know what's going on because the secretary is issuing reports. You know the finances because the treasurer is putting out reports. On the extracurricular front, we're going to take the very simplest approach, right? We're not going to have referendums and votes on a Congress every time we want to do something. We're going to have a direct relationship and dialogue with our clubs, much like the direct relationship and dialogue we're going to have with other schools to make sure that we're expanding Regine's social horizons, we're improving the day-to-day, and we're increasing the accountability and transparency of your government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. We're going to do questions from the audience real quick. President Vincenzo Guido is out in the audience right now with a microphone. And he is going to take a couple of questions from the audience.
As a current freshman myself, and with the incoming class in mind, how do you plan to introduce the idea of student government and responsibility and involvement in student government to the new freshmen?
Sure. Okay.
You have the mic, so.
Got it. All right. So it's going to be very simple, right? In terms of introducing accountability and transparency to the freshmen and responsibility and the way that we plan our government to work, it's very simply, again, setting a clear standard to which all officers, all executive officers are going to be held, right? Once we set that example of, okay, you're in student government, you have to do this, right? This is work. You should know that. Once we set that example, we don't think that there will be a problem with incoming freshmen knowing what student government does, being excited about student government, and wanting to get involved.
Yeah, so the main thing that we'd like to do in terms of working to make sure that student government does play a role in the integration of freshmen into the Regis experience, the main thing that we've talked about, and I believe JD touched on, was the introduction of a club fair, which we'd like to work together to pioneer over the summer to make sure that all of the clubs, both large and small, get the visibility that they deserve, so that every club can voice their concerns, or not their concerns, but rather they can show themselves to the student body, whether it's freshmen, sophomores, juniors, or seniors, and with any luck, hopefully inspire some new interests and allow for the furthering of new ones, old ones. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this question actually comes from someone that had to leave early, but it's for JD. So as Commissioner of Publicity, what concrete steps have you taken to increase extracurricular communications?
Sure. So I'm so bad at talking into this microphone. I'm so sorry. But when it comes to actually, concrete steps that I took in my particular campaign was that, first on the outreach to other girls' schools in the area. So we did expand that. Obviously, there's more to be done, but we did make very big strides in that case, and we did have the greatest dance turnout as we've seen. But, in keeping with this liaison committee idea and keeping with this idea of having inter-club relations, the thing that I'm most proud of, quite frankly, is the live stream event. And I know we talked about it very briefly in our opening statement, but I really would like to flesh that out a little bit right now if you guys would give me the time. The live stream event was essentially the success story that we want to be able to replicate over and over and over again. A student came to student government with an idea. Student government took that idea, got all the people that needed to come together, and then executed that idea and executed on that action to the best effect anyone could have possibly imagined. Right? So the live stream team, right, as we called it because it was funny, the live stream team, right, made up people of not only student government, not only the student body, Joe Callahan, who's running for your secretary, I believe. There he is. Filming this one, right? Not only the student government, not only the student body, but the IT team, the athletics department, right? The Falcon broadcast, who actually spoke over the mic and actually did the commentation itself, and Xavier High School. Yes, we actually worked with Xavier for once on something, but I digress. So essentially, that is the thing that I am most proudest of my particular tenure in student government. And that is a success story we want to not ameliorate, that's not the right word, but we want to take that success, thank you, Mr. Quinn. We want to take that success story and repeat that over and over and over again in a structure in which we can repeat that over and over and over again, namely that liaison committee. So thank you very much.
Thank you. One more question. From the Vice President, Mr. Haddad.
This question is going to be directed specifically at the McCooey-Zuccamaglio ticket. It's a scenario-based question, so based on something in your platform. So you've published the budget, because that's what you're committed to. You've done it, and you receive intense backlash from the entire student body on a part of the budget. Say, people feel you spent way, way, way too much on food, especially for one of the dances, especially considering that not many people were eating it. What do? Do you do you respond according to the people's response? Do you listen to them and suddenly, get rid of snacks at the dance or reduce funding for that? Or do you stay the course and, put just as much money into that idea or come up with some other stratagem that I have not thought of?
I think the alternative to not having our Treasury reports published is very simply acting without a feedback system, right? We don't know how people think that we're doing because they don't know where the money is being spent, right? If they're upset with that, there should be a reason for that discontent, right? Once we access why there's discontent, see if it's like substantial or there's anything behind it, I think that's how the government should work, right? If you don't have that, you don't have a feedback system, you're basically acting without anyone overseeing you, which is not what we want to do, right? We want to make sure that everyone approves of what we're doing, and if we don't have that approval, we're not interested in being in office.
So say you don't listen to the people and you stay the course. Thus, for the net, you're saying that it depends on the situation. In certain situations, you might go with their feedback, but in certain situations, you might stay the course.
Yes.
Okay.
And one last question. One of the issues too at student government meetings, you guys both brought this up too, is attendance of class officers and even executive officers at time to time. So say one of you guys is in student government next year. What are you going to do to ensure that all of the student representatives are there as much as possible to fulfill this promise of representation and equality that you guys are both talking about?
So on the question of actual attendance, I know that I am by no stretch the perfect attender to student government meetings, and I think that that's a fact of just being only human. And I think that when it comes down to it, we need to incentivize people to come to student government meetings. We have to give them a voice. We have to give them a reason to be there. And so that plays into our idea of bureaucratizing the government. We need to create more opportunities, more avenues for the class officers to actually make a legitimate change, to actually make a legitimate difference within their government so that they will be incentivized to come to those meetings. And if you want quite literally a way that we can assure that they're there or not, we should start taking attendance. And I'm pretty sure we already do. But start actually acting on that attendance and making sure we reach out to those people that were not at the meeting, figure out why they weren't at the meeting, and when they'll be, making up the time that they missed. So thank you very much.
So it's really great to have a carrot, but it's also incredibly important to have a stick. Right? So if people aren't showing up, if they aren't fulfilling their responsibilities, there needs to be some sort of repercussions, right? You were elected, people put their trust in you. The very least you can do is show up to the meetings, if not participate in them, right? As I think there's a judicial hall specified in the Constitution, right? If it comes to the point where people aren't coming to meetings, if they aren't doing anything, then they should be replaced, and there should be a snap election to replace them. I don't think that it would be that hard, and I think it would increase participation a lot.
And also, I believe the Judicial Hall would be run by the Vice President, and if any of you know Randall, I think he would be a very, authoritarian stick. Yeah.
All right, that concludes the debate. Thank you to both teams, and thank you for everyone who came out. I remind you about I invite you to tomorrow's mandatory assembly, where we will hear from all candidates. And I also remind you that polls will open immediately after tomorrow's assembly and close Thursday evening. Thank you very much.